California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz in Sacramento today. We are joined by Dos Williams. He is a member of the California State Assembly, also a candidate for the Board of Supervisors in Santa Barbara County. I'd like to speak with you about groundwater, which has been on top of mind for a couple of years. Let's go back, I guess, to last summer. Governor Brown signed what's known as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. What does that act do, sir?
Well, it's incredibly important. Even though we are one of the dry western states, think about the other western states, Utah, right, Arizona, all states much more conservative than us. They all have more regulation on groundwater than we do.
Well, we were the only state in the West that had no groundwater regulation. Even Texas had groundwater regulation.
And what this created is a bad situation where everyone has the incentive to just sink the deepest well,
right,
and to take as much water out first, particularly in times of drought.
And we know that's been happening.
We know.
And how do we know that? We've seen subsidence in the Central Valley.
That's right.
We've seen seawater intrusion in the Central Coast, for example.
And we really need to preserve our groundwater supplies. During times of drought, they account for as much as 60% of our water usage, of our water supply. And this is crucial. Also, the potential for groundwater is huge. A lot of people go, well, how do you deal with droughts in the long term? There now is far more space in our groundwater basins,
the aquifers,
than there is in any number of dams that we could ever build.
So let me ask you, before we talk about your bill, which I would like to discuss, what are we doing? There are two elements. First, the proposition that passed in November, the water bond, is that looking to bolster our groundwater basins?
It is. A large portion of that bond includes money to help create sustainable plans for usage of groundwater supplies. It also includes money for recycled water, where you could replenish groundwater supplies from recycled water,
right,
which is a huge unexplored potential.
And how quickly are those projects coming online? We need action now.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously in times of drought, the quickest thing to do is more conservation and more water technology. In fact, there's more than twice as much capacity water we could save just by conserving in urban uses than if we built all of the dams that we could build in the state of California.
Okay.
So there's a huge amount of capacity for conservation still left to go. But what do we do past conservation? And one of those is making sure, and the most important, is making sure that we have a sustainable groundwater supply.
And so let's talk about that. There have been some concerns that the Groundwater Act of 2014 really postpones the needed fixes for too long. I mean, 25 years to get a plan in place. There are some adjudicated basins, but be that as it may, you, though, are looking at a specific element
Absolutely.
Of the groundwater debate, and that deals with, I guess they're called Class 2 injection wells. Is that accurate,
I think
sir?
it's just easiest to think about it as wells that oil operations inject their waste into to get rid of their waste. And so this happens in many counties in the state, including in Santa Barbara and Ventura County, and also our next door Kern County, and even in LA County. They take wells, and this is into areas where there's water, groundwater, and they put wastewater in it.
Aren't there regulations to prevent that, sir?
There is supposed to be regulation through Dogger, but it turns out that Dogger,
which is a California state agency,
that's right, never checked on over 2,000 wells.
Right. I remember there was an explosive hearing on this very issue a few weeks back.
It's huge because we're in the middle of a drought. We need that groundwater, and yet we're not checking if these proposed wastewater injection wells are connected to water that could be used for beneficial use, either potable water, which is water we can use for drinking or other things, or water we could use for ag that could help us save water, potable water that's now going to ag.
So what does your bill, AB 356, do on this
It's really
issue?
important. It says, look, we can't just rely on Dogger, the agency that messed this up in the first place. They don't even know. Their head was very honest with me. He does not even know why these were not checked.
Okay.
And it hands it to the experts, which is the State Water Resources Board, and says,
But
look,
isn't Dogger part of the State Water Resources Board?
no, they're two different
okay.
agencies. And the Water Board will certify and do the well test and make sure this is not connected to a potable water use before we give people new permits to drill these injection wells.
So when does this happen? One could argue this should happen yesterday.
It should have happened yesterday. It
Right.
should have happened for years. It has not been. But if this legislation is successful, it would start January 1st.
So talk to us about the potential for success for this legislation. I'm sure that while on the surface it seems appropriate, admittedly we're hearing one side of the story.
Sure.
And so have you cleared the opposition, or are folks coming?
Well, as
you.
you know, Brad, the Assembly floor has been a very hostile place to any regulation on oil. Oil industry has a lot of power in Sacramento, and I think this will be a really good test. It will be a test of, can the oil industry win even when it's the most reasonable regulatory
Right, but
question?
couldn't one argue in some ways this actually protects them? Because look, I mean, if they start to inject wastewater into potable groundwater basins, aren't they at risk of liability?
None have been sued successfully thus far.
Really?
But I do think that there is that possibility in the long run. And
Or
I do think this
remediation?
is,
I mean,
I do think this is much better for them in the long run, because this is something that Californians that have heard about this are understandably angry, and they should be angry at the industry, because even at the wells where we know they have not checked, those oil operations are continuing to pump wastewater injection right now as we speak. And it's because they were granted a permit, and so they claim they still have a property right because
So
they were
can
granted
you
a permit.
revoke those permits under the law?
Well, my bill
or this
would
law?
not revoke their permits. It would just say before there is a new permit.
What about the existing sites that are
Well, they all have
allegedly
to go,
poisoning
Right.
our groundwater
They
basin?
have to renew their permits each over time.
And will this law deal with those renewals?
It will.
Okay, I want to speak generally, sir, about the drought. You're representing the Central Coast with significant ag interests. How are your constituents doing? Your ag interests, your residential interests?
Well, the good thing about representing Santa Barbara and Ventura County is we have a lot of people who are very used to droughts and are very want to conserve, and we have one of the lowest per capita water use
I've read.
out there.
Right.
And we were the one place that basically made it illegal to water your lawn during the last drought in the 90s. We're very proud of that fact, and we are also one of the places that has embraced cash for grass programs, where a water agency helps pay for the re-landscaping
I
of
gotta ask
lawns.
you about your potential desal plant. A lot of chatter about whether Santa Barbara is going to bring a plant back online and open a desal operation. It had been, I guess it was online for a short time in the 90s, or was about to go online?
It was online for about an hour.
An hour,
or a
right.
day.
Okay. Whatever it may be, but we know your friends in Carlsbad have one online, in Cambria, above your district has one online. What do you think? Desal's seen as part of the solution for the future.
Well, I think, unfortunately, that in emergencies, people go to the most expensive,
Right, yep.
hardest to build, longest to build, and most impractical options first.
But does the desal plant fall under that? I mean, it's...
I think unless you build renewable capacity, yes, because the reason why we did not operate that desal plant was because the ongoing cost of running it is so big because of the energy usage.
You'll come back?
Absolutely.
He is Das Williams, member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerantz in Sacramento. It's California Edition.